Hello and welcome back to Glenn's Small Engine. This video we're going to be working on an ECHO 225. This same engine is used on several pieces of equipment: the GT-225, the SRM-225, the PAS split boom 225, probably the most common ones, but there's also a pole saw that uses it, a hedge trimmer, and maybe some other ones. So if you got an ECHO 225, this is probably going to cover yours. This trimmer's been setting up about 3 years. It was running fine when they parked it. That's what they told us. It feels really good. It's got good compression. We got fire, but it just won't pick up fuel on its own. If I give it a little prime with fuel, it'll start and run and burn that prime up, and then it'll die. It won't continue to pump fuel. And so we're going to be going through the fuel system, carburetor, fuel line, fuel filter, that sort of thing. Most of the repair work that I see on these trimmers is fuel related, so that's why I'm doing this video. Hopefully this helps you. While you're here, look around. I have other repair videos. If you find this video helpful, or any of my other ones, please hit the subscribe button. So right now I'm gonna give this one a prime of fuel and just show you what it does on a prime. Take the air filter off. I've just got this old primer here. I'm just going to use it to squirt a little fuel down the intake there. One side pulls the fuel up. I'll just pull some fuel up into the primer. Move the hose to the other side. Hold the throttle open. Push it in there. Get the fuel out of our way so we don't start a fire. It cranks and burns that fuel up and then it dies. So we know we got a good engine here that'll run if we can just get it some fuel. So hang on, we're going to be going through this carburetor here. We're going to be taking this carburetor off. The carburetor's held on with a Torx bit. It's a T27 Torx bit. Also this throttle cable here, this is a 10mm. We're just going to loosen this off a couple of turns. Pull the throttle cable off. You want to be careful, make sure you don't lose this gasket that goes behind it. There's a choke plate. We're going to pull our fuel lines off. This fuel looks really bad. It's in the tank. We're going to dump it. All these lines are really hard and brittle here, so we're going to replace all that. We're going to replace everything here. This fuel filter, fuel line, this little grommet here, a main fuel line in, primer return line, and then this is a vent here. But we're going to replace everything here. I'll reuse this vent. It's the only thing I'll reuse. Okay, this carburetor is kind of dirty and nasty, so we're going to go wash it up before I start tearing it down, because we just don't want to make it any worse than it is. You tear a carburetor down this dirty and you're just asking for trouble. This carburetor is really sensitive to dirt, so we're going to keep it clean. So I'm going to go wash this up in naphtha or diesel fuel, or you can even use gasoline. Just be careful. Don't use anything harsh on this carburetor. B12 or anything harsh like that will ruin this carburetor. Go get you some popcorn and I'll be back in a minute. We're back. We got this carburetor clean. This primer here is rotten. You can see that it's got a hole in it. If you see a primer that's dark like this and it's already got a hole in it, well, you know the condition of your carburetor diaphragms is going to be about the same. It's rare that you see a rotten primer in a good carburetor. If you're lucky, you can replace the primer and you might get a little more use out of it if you're lucky. But 9 out of 10 times, if your primer's rotten and your fuel lines are rotten, the diaphragms in your carburetor are going to be rotten. So this carburetor has two sides to it. This side here with these two screws. This is the metering side. This is actually the carburetor side. The side with your primer block, this is your primer and your primer block. This is your fuel pump side. When you hit the primer, it pushes fuel back to the tank, causing your main fuel line to pull fuel from your tank. On this carburetor, your main fuel line is the little nipple with the multiple barbs on it. That's your main fuel line. This smaller fuel line is your return line. When you push the primer, it pushes fuel back to the tank. Alright, we're going to start by taking the metering side off. So here's your meter inside of your carburetor. This diaphragm right here is supposed to be really soft. Diaphragm here should be really soft, but it's not, it's hard. When it's hard like this and brittle, you know, that's not going to pump any fuel. It's got to be real soft to pump fuel. You can see right there that we have our metering lever and the needle. It's got a little spring under it. You want to be careful not to lose that spring. There's our spring, needle, and lever. Okay, now we're going to start pulling off this primer side, which is the fuel pump side. It starts with these 4 screws that hold the primer on. Okay, there's our primer right there and our cover. Okay, this primer block actually has an additional screw right in the middle of it. Okay, there's our fuel pump diaphragm. We also have a little tiny screen right there that catches debris that's so small that it can get by the fuel pump. This diaphragm is really brittle. It should be nice and soft to pump fuel, but it's just brittle. It's breaking up. As I move it here, it just breaks. This little screen right here, you can pop it out with a razor blade, just like that. It's just a little screen there, just to help catch debris that gets by the fuel filter. We're going to take these screws out of the top and pull this throttle plate off here, because our repair kit comes with a new little roller that this rolls on, and I can tell this one's kind of stiff. Also, it gives us a chance to kind of clean out in there too. That little roller is right there. There's the little roller. The repair kit comes with one. I like to replace it because they just get wore out. And it rolls right here on this barrel top throttle. It rolls right on there. Alright, what we're going to do is kind of lightly blow this off. And then I'm going to put some seafoam on it. I like to use this little stand here to get the carburetor up off the workbench. Just gets it up a little higher where I can see it. I'm going to use some of this seafoam and put in the metering area of the carburetor. I'm going to let that soak for about 10 minutes on the metering area. Also, I'm going to pour a little bit on my primer check valves. And I'm just going to let that soak a little bit. While I'm gathering up my parts, I'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, we've got our parts here. We've got our carburetor kit, our little grommet that goes in the tank, our fuel filter, some fuel line. We're going to lightly blow off this seafoam. It doesn't have to all get off there. It's just helping it anyway. This carburetor kit here, I'll leave some links down in the description on where to get this kit. There's our fuel pump diaphragm, there's our metering diaphragm, our screen, our spring, lever, needle, little rod. We're going to kind of go back in the order that we came apart in here. See if I can zoom in just a little bit and see if that'll help. The first thing I'm going to do is install this little bitty tiny roller right in here on that shoulder where it goes. That way that it'll roll, that throttle, barrel throttle can roll on it. I'm going to squirt a little WD-40 on it. Go ahead and set this right back down where it was on there. All right, we want to pull all these screws down evenly on this. We're not going to tighten these screws yet, we're just going to run them down. We don't want anything tight yet till we get them all in there and all ran down. Now that we have them all in there, we can go ahead and start snugging them down. Try to snug them down evenly. Pull them all down together here, make sure that throttle works smooth there. Now we're going to go ahead and put the fuel pump side on. We got this little screen that goes in here. Want to make sure your screwdriver's clean. You're going to gently push that down in there and square it up. I like to go ahead and put a little WD-40 on this carburetor. On the fuel pump side, your diaphragm goes down first, then your gasket, then your primer block. The primer block has one screw. Snug it down. Not real tight, just good and snug. We're going to get our new primer bulb here. The plate that goes over the primer. This plate has a little bend in it. Be sure and put that bend in the right direction. It goes out away from the barbs for your fuel lines. I have seen people put that on backwards. Run these screws down evenly. Don't pull one down too tight before you get the other ones down. Once you get them all pulled down, then go ahead and tighten them up. Alright, now we're going to put our metering needle, lever, and spring in. The needle goes in that small hole there. The spring sits in right behind it. Then your little metering lever. It's going to go right there. I'm going to hold it with my thumb. Hold it in place with my thumb until I can get this little screw started in there. I'm making sure that it's in correctly. Tighten it up. Now this little metering lever here, it should be real smooth. It shouldn't be hanging up or anything. Make sure it's nice and smooth, and the top of this should come square with the base of the carburetor. That you can use to check this, and it should just be just square with the top of the carburetor, but you don't have to have this tool. You can use a straight edge. Just make sure it's just square with the top of this carburetor. I should just barely almost touch it right there. And you can gently pry up on it a little bit or push down on it, but you can see with this tool it's the same thing. All we're trying to do is get that lever square with the top of the carburetor. unsure about how to adjust that lever, you can always reuse your old lever here because there was nothing wrong with it. It's not wore out or anything. The problem with this carburetor was these diaphragms. It was all rotten in this primer. Okay, on your metering side, the gasket goes down first, then the diaphragm. Remember, on the pump side, the diaphragm was first in the gasket. Well, it's just opposite over here on the metering side. Put your gasket down first, then your diaphragm, then this plate. It's held on by 2 screws. Run them down evenly. Don't pull one side down too tight before you get them both down. Then when you get them both down, go ahead and torque them down. Just good and tight. You don't want to break that screw off or strip it off in there. You just want to tighten it up good and tight. Okay, so this carburetor is done, so we're going to set it aside, and now we're going to put our grommet in the tank and our fuel line and our fuel filter. We are going to reuse this vent here because nothing's wrong with it. The vent still is okay. I just wanted to show you what's inside this vent here. If you pop this little cap off, it's got a little piece of foam right there, and then it's got a rubber check valve, and these are usually pretty durable. This one here feels just fine, so we're going to just put it back in there. Well, there's nothing wrong with this check valve, so we're just going to stick it right back down in there. This piece of foam's okay. It's not coming apart or anything. And that's why I reuse those check valves. We're going to blow the fuel tank out just a little bit here. This grommet here, we're going to stick it down in that hole. It just pops down in there like so. This fuel line, to get it through that hole, what I usually do is cut a little sharp edge on it like that. Put a little WD-40 on it. I'll run it through there, about right there. Fuel filter on there. Okay, there's our main fuel line there. We're going to trim it. Do the same thing again. This is going to be our primer return line. We're going to stick it in there. I usually stick it in there just a few inches. It doesn't matter. Just to return your line. Then the next one is going to be this vent line. This lets the tank breathe. See, this fuel cap is not vented. There's no vent in this cap, so that's why we need this vent right here. Now this vent, I'm just sticking that line through there far enough that it'll stay in place. You don't want to stick it in very far. If you go very far in with that vent line, fuel will come back up instead of air. We just want the tank to breathe. We don't want fuel coming out of it. We're going to test this carburetor before we put it back on. Make sure that the primer's working. We're just going to put a little piece of fuel line on this main fuel line nipple. It's the one with it's the slightly bigger with multiple barbs on it. Then we're going to stick that line down in a tank, and if it's working, it should be drawing up fuel. And you can see that that's working just fine. So we know that at least we got our carburetor together right, or that wouldn't be working. If it wouldn't pull up fuel and prime right now, it'd be a good time to take it back apart because it's probably not going to work. I usually like to go ahead and slide my filter and choke block on there. Then I'll put this gasket on there, make sure that the gasket is on correctly. You can see where it laid on there. There's actually a little pulse hole that goes up through there. That's what drives your fuel pump. Okay, we're going to hook our lines up now. Remember, this first line we put on was our main line. This other line is the primer return line. Hook our throttle back up. Spot that it slides in right there. This is a 10mm wrench here. We're going to tighten that back down right there. And we're going to go ahead and add some fuel to it. This is my fuel. This is fresh fuel here. Alright, if we did everything right, it should be ready to start and run here. We're going to make sure the switch is on. Air filter, cover. I hope this video helped you and saved you some money. Stay tuned for more repair videos. I'll try to be posting some more. If you like what you see, look around. I have other repair videos. Just hit that subscribe button. I'll try to post the links to the parts that I used in this video here. Runs like a brand new one. Man, that sounds good. I'm fixing to test it. If it starts on one pull, you have to hit the subscribe button. Look at there. Now hit that subscribe button. Oh man. Sorry about that. Last night was taco night. Oh, excuse me. We used to call that a German torque wrench. Good and taut. Good and taut. I guess in German that means good and tight. But anyway, that's a German torque wrench.